Hey everyone, buckle up because today we're diving into some seriously thought-provoking research about the future of humanity.
That's right. We're taking a look at a fascinating report from Russian scholars presented to the Club of Rome.
And let me tell you, this isn't your typical the world is ending kind of report. It's way more nuanced and thought-provoking than that.
Absolutely. These researchers are taking a really interesting approach. They're looking at the big picture of human civilization from a historical perspective.
And that's where we get the first big aha moment. You ready for this? Global population and economic growth, which have been skyrocketing for centuries, are actually slowing down.
And we're not talking about a little dip in the road here. This slowdown started in the 1970s and represents a fundamental shift in global dynamics.
Okay, so that might ring a bell for some of you. Back in the 70s, everyone was talking about the limits to growth report, right? Were those predictions just wrong?
Well, those predictions were based on the idea that current trends would simply continue on the same trajectory. This new research, however, suggests we need a different approach.
So instead of just hitting fast forward on the trends we're seeing now, what are they suggesting we look at?
They're emphasizing the need to analyze the underlying mechanisms of global processes. Think of it like this: instead of just looking at the symptoms, we need to understand the root causes.
And they specifically call out social interactions as a key mechanism that's difficult to predict. So it's not just about how much we consume or produce, but how we interact and organize ourselves as a global society.
Precisely. And this is where that historical perspective becomes really eliminating. You see, this isn't the first time humanity has experienced this kind of slowdown.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. They're connecting these shifts to past technological revolutions, right? Like massive societal upheavals.
Exactly. Think about the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution. These weren't just changes in what we produced, but fundamental shifts in how human society was structured.
So are they saying we're in the middle of one of these massive revolutions right now?
That's exactly what they're arguing. They call it the digital revolution, and they believe it's pushing us towards a cybernetic society.
A cybernetic society. Okay, so picture a world where technology, especially digital technology and AI, is deeply intertwined with every aspect of our lives. That's what we're moving towards.
And what's crucial for us to understand is that this shift away from business as usual is happening on two levels: in our global systems and in how we think about the future itself.
All right, everyone. So far, we've established that the old ways of doing things are changing and a new era is upon us. But what does this actually mean for us? Let's unpack that in the next part of our deep dive. So we're hurtling towards this cybernetic society. Things are changing faster than ever, and the old models for predicting the future are breaking down. Should we be worried?
That's the interesting thing about this research. It doesn't shy away from the challenges, but it also offers a surprisingly optimistic perspective, especially when it comes to humanity's relationship with our planet.
Okay, so there's good news. Tell me more. I'm ready for some optimism.
Remember how we talked about moving beyond simplistic extrapolations and looking at the underlying mechanisms of global processes?
Yeah, like digging deeper to understand the root causes instead of just reacting to the symptoms.
Exactly. Well, when you apply that same approach to climate change, a fascinating detail emerges.
All right, I'm intrigued. Hit me with this fascinating detail.
The research points out that the greenhouse effect itself isn't inherently a bad thing. In fact, it's what makes Earth habitable in the first place. Without it, our planet would be a frozen, lifeless rock.
That's actually a really good point. I had never thought about it that way. It's easy to forget that the greenhouse effect is a natural phenomenon.
Exactly. The issue isn't the existence of the greenhouse effect, but rather the excess of it. The trouble we're seeing now is largely due to the spike in human activity, particularly since the 1970s, which has thrown things out of whack.
So it's not about eliminating the greenhouse effect altogether, but about finding a sustainable balance.
Right. Precisely. And that's where the researchers see potential for positive change. They believe we can leverage technology and make conscious choices to achieve that balance.
So technology to the rescue. Are we talking renewables, carbon capture, that kind of thing?
They definitely delve into those technologies, especially the potential of renewable energy sources like solar and wind power and carbon capture methods to reduce our emissions.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
You know me too well. While these technologies are essential, the researchers emphasize that they're only part of the solution. The real game changer, they argue, involves a global shift in energy consumption.
Okay, so what does that look like? Are we all going to be living off the grid, growing our own food, and powering our homes with bicycle generators?
That's a fun image, but not quite what they have in mind. The research actually points to an intriguing scenario they call the blue map.
Blue map sounds intriguing. But a little cryptic. What's the deal with this blue map?
Imagine a world where energy consumption is decoupled from economic growth. Remember how we talked about those slowing growth rates? The blue map suggests that with the right technological advancements and social choices, we can achieve a good standard of living for everyone without constantly needing more and more energy.
So instead of assuming that more economic growth automatically equals more energy consumption, we find ways to break that link. That makes sense, but it also sounds like a monumental task.
It certainly won't be easy, but what's encouraging is that these researchers are highlighting that it's within the realm of possibility. The blue map scenario shows us that a future where humanity and nature can thrive in a more balanced relationship isn't just a pipe dream.
Okay, so that's a bit of hope for the environmental piece of the puzzle. But even if we manage to get that whole humanity versus nature thing sorted out, we still have those massive social and political shifts to contend with. How does that play into all of this?
That's a crucial question. And it's what these researchers see as the next big hurdle. They argue that even if technology isn't the main obstacle to a flourishing future, our social systems might be.
So the challenge isn't just figuring out the how-to of a sustainable future. It's about how we adapt our societies and our ways of interacting with each other to fit that future.
Exactly. Buckle up, everyone, because things are about to get philosophical.
All right, so we've talked about the big shift away from business as usual and the potential for a more balanced relationship with nature. And now we're getting into the really complex stuff, social systems. Where do we even begin?
Well, the researchers frame this challenge around a fundamental question. If technology isn't the main obstacle to a sustainable and thriving future, what is?
And their answer is, hit me with it.
It all boils down to how our social systems adapt to this new era we're entering.
Okay, that makes sense. We can't just keep doing things the same old way when everything around us is changing so dramatically. But what are the specific realities our social systems need to adapt to? What's got the researchers concerned?
They highlight two major factors reshaping the social landscape. First, globalization has completely changed the game. We're interconnected like never before, for better or for worse.
Tell me about it. It often feels like something happening on the other side of the world can have a direct impact on our lives here.
Exactly. And here's the catch. While we're more interconnected than ever, we're also facing global resource limits. This combination, intense interconnection plus finite resources, creates a situation where that old winner-take-all approach to competition just isn't going to cut it anymore.
So we can't just keep fighting over scraps. We have to find new ways to cooperate. Is that what you're saying?
You got it. And this leads to the second key factor, the emergence of what they call a cybernetic society. But we touched on that earlier.
Yeah, we talked about it in the context of technological advancements, but how does a cybernetic society tie into this idea of cooperation versus competition?
Well, the researchers outlined two potential scenarios for the future of this cybernetic society. One that's more controlled and one that's more cooperative.
Two possible futures. Okay, now I'm really interested. Let's start with the controlled one. What's that look like?
They call it inclusive capitalism. Picture a world run by a powerful elite who control resources and information. Think massive corporations, financial institutions, tech giants, the whole shebang.
Now, what about the rest of us? Where do we fit into this inclusive capitalism?
In this scenario, your basic needs are met. You have food, shelter, health care.
But there's always a but, right?
You know.
Yeah.
But in exchange for having your basic needs met, your freedom and autonomy are limited. You're heavily monitored, and many of your decisions are influenced or even made for you by AI algorithms.
Whoa. So it's kind of like that classic sci-fi trope of a seemingly utopian society that's actually very controlling and dystopian under the surface.
Exactly. And the researchers point out that this inclusive capitalism scenario shares some similarities with ideas being floated around today, things like stakeholder capitalism and using AI for social governance. It's not as far-fetched as it might seem.
Okay, so inclusive capitalism is a bit ominous. What about the second scenario? Give me some hope here.
The second scenario is called the world organism. It's definitely more utopian, though. Some might say it's a bit out there.
Hey, I'm open to out there if it means avoiding a digital dystopia. Tell me more.
In this vision, you still have highly specialized individuals, but the focus is on cooperation and shared goals guided by a strong ethical framework.
So instead of everyone constantly competing, we're all working together towards the common good.
Precisely. Direct democracy thrives via network technology, and competition is channeled into creative pursuits rather than hoarding resources. Think large-scale collaborative art projects, scientific breakthroughs that benefit everyone, that kind of thing.
So it's less about me versus you and more about us working together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The researchers draw a fascinating parallel to how a biological organism functions with specialized parts working together in harmony.
So instead of competing nations or individuals, we're more like cells in a giant global organism. That's a pretty wild concept, but I kind of love it. It's strangely beautiful.
It's certainly a compelling vision, and the researchers believe that the digital revolution combined with a shift in social values could create the conditions for this kind of society to emerge.
Okay, so we have two possible futures. Inclusive capitalism, the high-tech but controlled society versus the world organism, the cooperative and harmonious society. That's a lot to process. What does it all mean for us listening to this right now? Are we supposed to pick a side and start prepping for the future we want?
Here's the really important point. The researchers emphasize that we're not just passively predicting the future. We're actively shaping it through our choices every single day.
So it's not about choosing a side, but understanding the forces at play and making conscious decisions to nudge us towards the future we want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing both the potential pitfalls of a technology-driven society that becomes too controlling and the possibilities for greater cooperation and global harmony that this new era presents.
Wow, this has been a really thought-provoking deep dive. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure. Always happy to be here.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this journey into the future. It's a future full of challenges, for sure. But as we've heard today, it's also a future brimming with possibilities. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep shaping the world you want to live in.